Hello, my name is Fred Cox. I'm running for the Salt Lake County Council District 2. Hopefully you can hear me now. Again, my name is Fred Cox. I'm running for Salt Lake County Council District 2 in Salt Lake County. The district includes a number of areas on the west side. It includes the west part of West Valley. It includes Kearns and Magna, Copperton, West Jordan west of U-111. It includes areas in South Jordan and in Herman, even a small area of Riverton. There's roughly around 67,000 voters in the area, perhaps even more than that, and certainly more residents. Because if you look at Salt Lake County, there's approximately 1 million people in the county, and when this district was created, it was designed to be about a sixth. So there's a lot of people in this particular area. Since our last meeting, I have had some questions asked to me, and I'm just going to read a few of them and then talk about those, and then I want to give you a little bit of information. I want to take a lot of time today. One of the things that I would like to learn today, one of the things that I really like about having an individual town hall, and the reason that I've typically had them multiple times throughout the years when I was in the state legislature, is I would learn. I would set up a meeting, I would maybe introduce something, but I would spend the majority of the time listening to smart individuals coming up with great ideas on how to solve things. That is very important to me, and I realize that Facebook Live is perhaps not necessarily ideal for that. I've been looking at Zoom. That has some pros and cons as well. But the idea is, somebody asked me what I would say are the biggest challenges facing the county right now. The first one I listed was growth. Taxes, transportation, water, sewer, air quality, and crime. And I wanted to mention why on those items. Growth is something that can happen to Salt Lake County if we do not, as a state, work to help individuals and various other places in the state do better. We have a number of people leaving the rural communities and coming to Salt Lake County. There have been a number of suggestions made by different governor candidates on how to change that. But right now, we have a number of people coming. Growth is important to deal with, and one of the reasons that I sent out a notice on Utah for responsiblegrowth.org has a referendum to block 2 of the 3 ordinances from the Olympia Hills vote that the county council recently passed on a 6-3 vote. The individuals in that area next to Herman were opposed to the development as proposed. Not proposed to any development, but just the size and scope and the rules that were put in place. They were very clear on that. There were meetings out there I was able to attend and listen to a number of comments. But that is something that is important to deal with. How do we deal with growth? What the county council did was, if they had adopted a master plan that say, hey, we want to allow growth in this area to this kind of density, that's one thing. But to rezone 900 acres all at once, I believe was a mistake. And to create a development agreement that a future city, either Herman or a new city, or would end up inheriting that contract, not being able to change the rules after the fact. I believe that was a huge mistake. We have other areas in our county. So, for example, Kearns recently put a 6-month moratorium on building permits being issued, which is a huge. As an architect, I was sitting in the audience at that meeting. In fact, I probably was the only one there that was not associated with the meeting, but I went to that meeting to find out why. And I made a suggestion of maybe a word that they could change in their proposal, and they didn't. But the reason is they inherited rules and regulations and their zoning ordinances and maps from the county, and they had found that it was not working for them. So they wanted to do something different. It is wrong for the county to take 900 acres and set it up so that some other city is going to have to live with the decisions made and not have the ability of making the choice locally. So growth is important to focus on, to deal with. It may come, it may not come. We don't know what will happen with the current situation as far as virus, as far as the economy. Taxes is the other thing that I wrote down. We have a huge amount of taxes being spent, if you will, by the county. Even though the majority of the county is now in cities or metro townships, how do we reduce that? Why is it 1.4 billion, or depending on which account you look at, it might be less, but it's a lot of money. I could use some ideas on how to reduce that. I've started going through the budget. I can see, we're spending this much on this area. We're spending this someplace else. Transportation. Transportation is very important. Excuse me. We have things happening with the Mountain View Corridor. We have connections at 5600 West and 201. There are a number of things happening on transportation, but transportation is weak in a number of areas. What can the county do with the budget that they have? And maybe that's something that they should be doing with the money that they're not as much as they should. But transportation is important, and cars is not always the answer. But there's bikes, there's foot traffic, there's other things that we can do as far as transportation. Water and sewer is very important. And the reason why water and sewer is very important is let's just take Olympia Hills again. When I started reading through the traffic studies, the sewer district reports, the water district reports, the water district basically said, we will be able to provide water for the development. We're not ready for the sewer. Eventually, we probably can be. But if this development goes in, we do not have enough water for the West Bench. That means that the rest of the West Bench for Salt Lake Valley is going to have to get their water from someplace else. They don't have sources lined up for it. And they made an interesting statement. That water is going to have to come from the Bear River. Well, I don't know about you, but that's a long distance. And that could require literally billions of dollars to get the water from the Bear River to get to the west part of Salt Lake Valley. One of the things that was raised in the legislature a number of years ago with Bear River and some of the other water situations that we have is if we're not careful, the Great Salt Lake will dry up on certain years and it'll become a dust bowl, causing major air quality problems. Another thing that was mentioned by several people that are pretty smart is if we could reduce the amount of evaporation for Utah Lake, because half of its water evaporates. We think of evaporation at Great Salt Lake, but Utah Lake loses a large amount of its water to evaporation. If we can work on that area, we would bring in more acre feet of water than we could ever get from Bear River. So there are ways, and that could save several $billion of money. Water and sewer is very important. I spent 2 years working so that we would be able to collect and use rainwater at our houses a lot easier than we could before. When a raindrop hits your sidewalk or snowflake, it's the state's. It claims it. And we've got provisions that you can collect and use up to 2,500 gallons of rainwater. I've got some information on my blog going back to probably 2012, 2013 on exactly how that works. But water is big. Air quality I mentioned, obviously dust, pollution. Um, we should not shut down our economy in the process, but if we focus on things that we can do, there are a number of things we can do as far as air quality. I was part of a air quality caucus when I was in the legislature to try to come up with ways that we could improve air quality. The last thing I mentioned is crime. When one of the individuals that was running our neighborhood watch in my area decided that he had had enough, he burned himself out. He was going to uh, have the neighborhood watch group basically shut down. The city was going to take away the signs that we'd paid for. And I called them up and said, how do we keep it? And they said, well, we need somebody that has had a background check, had some training and fingerprinted. And I said, well, what's that going to cost? And they said $15. And I said, how many meetings do I need a year? And they told me that I needed at least 2. And I said, well, I can do that. And so I ended up becoming neighborhood watch chair for about 700 houses. Crime is important to deal with. Unfortunately, people become selfish or desperate, and they make decisions that harm others. If we have a number of people looking out for each other, we use a Facebook group. We've been successful in using that group of tracking individuals as they move through the neighborhood and have the police catch them and arrest them. We had a church broken into and vandalized, and that's exactly what happened. Somebody in our Facebook group noticed something happening, notified us, people watched, and we basically told the police where the individuals were. There's things that we can do. Individuals, and let me go back to the virus, the pandemic. Should government be telling us everything that we should and shouldn't do? Should the government be taking away our rights? Should the government be doing lots of things that the government is currently doing? My initial reaction is no. We need to have leadership tell us things that will help protect us, and we need to be smart. And if we need to stay 6 feet away from each other, we need to work on that. If we can't have large gatherings because of that, that's another thing that we can do. There are many things that the governor and others have suggested that we do that is smart, and we need to be smart. If we're not smart, government has a tendency to take away our rights. If you look at our Constitution, our state and federal Constitution, there are limits to what government can do. So I want you to know that I care very much about our constitutions. I do care. I know people that have gotten the virus. And a friend of mine just died this morning. I hope that he didn't die because of the virus. I don't know yet. He's only been gone for a couple hours, and I haven't heard. But there are individuals that are affected, and we should be smart. We should care about others. We should avoid possibly passing on the virus if we have it and don't know about it. I had somebody ask a question earlier about masks. I'm not a big fan of masks, but they're saying, hey, these cloth masks may help us if we happen to have the virus and not know about it, not pass it to somebody else if we're in an area where we can't keep our distance. That's something to think about. Something that is being discussed. The state's looking at that more as far as perhaps some specifications or whatever. But there are things that we can do. We go to a grocery store, take some and leave some. If we clean them out every time we walk in, there's nothing for anybody else. And I've gone for weeks looking for like a Lysol disinfectant spray. It's not there. None of the stores that I've gone to have any of it. So anytime they put it on the shelf, it's gone. Toilet paper is starting to show up again. People are starting to leave some so that there's some left for somebody else. That's very important. Why should you vote for me? There are other candidates that have great experience that are sharp. One of the reasons that you should vote for me is I have learned. I'm an architect. That's good and bad. Some people like architects, some people don't. But I have learned that I do not know everything. I am smart when I ask somebody that does know. If I have a question on locks, I know somebody that I go to. If I have a question on bricks, I can ask somebody that's smarter than me on bricks. We need people in government that are willing to listen, that are willing to ask, that do not think they know everything. One of the reasons that I ran the Utah tax referendum this last year, and yeah, I was the original sponsor. I got 4 other individuals to sign the form so that they were sponsors as well, and we had thousands of people help statewide. So no, I didn't get 170,000 or 180,000 signatures myself. I wouldn't be able to do that. I asked others to help, and they stepped up and they did it. But the reason that I ran that was I had attended meetings. There was one in Kearns. I attended. I was one of the 30 some odd people that spoke. And I listened to what people said. And what they told the legislature was don't do this, don't go this direction. There are other solutions. And the legislature listened of things that they needed to take into account when they did what they did. So they did not listen at all. The instructions from the people were don't do this. And they said, all right, when we do this, we need to take this into account. We need to provide resources here and there because people are going to be harmed. And they created a mess. And when it finally was passing and I was watching on my phone and there was a 2/3 vote in the Senate, I thought, they've got 20. That's how many they need. I went to the House. I think they got 43. They needed 50 out of the 75 members to vote for it. They didn't have it, and I thought they don't have enough to get immediate implementation under state constitution. So the earliest this thing could take effect is 60 days, and it is subject to referendum. And it went back to the Senate. Somebody had left. They got 19 votes, and I thought, this is subject to referendum. I don't like this bill. I didn't like it. I had told the sponsor the Saturday before I didn't like it. I told the governor the Saturday before I didn't like it personally. And I explained why, and I explained why I believed that as drafted, it violated our state constitution. They didn't listen. They didn't listen at all. Or they listened and ignored me because, I'm just Fred. What do I know? They've talked to some smart attorneys that said that they could get away with it. Well, unfortunately, a number of the legislature were bullied into voting for it, and that was a mistake. Some of them still believe it was a good idea, and I think perhaps they should find themselves out of office. That's unfortunate. But I contacted the most liberal friends that I had and the most conservative friends, and I said, if we will work together, we can block this bill from ever being implemented. And that's what we did. Now, right now, speaking of growth, there is these group of individuals that are fighting this Olympia Hills project vote by this county council. They're willing to actually accept my compromise, which was let's focus on the master plan and then leave the rezoning and the development agreement either to later or to a smaller area. So they're focusing on those two items. They need over 80,000 signatures, and with the virus, there have been modifications made with the enforcement of our state law to allow this to be handled so you have the ability of printing out, physically signing both of those items as far as a referendum, scanning it or taking a photo of those and emailing it back or texting it back. And if they get the signatures in a very short period of time, they can basically block those two provisions. You could agree with me, don't agree with me. I wrote a blog post 2 months ago. If you go to my website, Fred Cox, the number 4, Utah.com, and then there's a link to a blog Blogspot. I've had it for over 10 years. All sorts of things about me. If you want to look it up, my ideas, I haven't taken them out down. So I'm sure there's something in there that you're going to disagree with. But I wrote why I was opposed to this particular development. As an architect, I have designed mixed use, high density projects on smaller, whether it's 1 acre or 3 acres or 5 acres, smaller areas where there's a specific reason for it to go there. A developer wants to do it. So I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept, but you have to be very careful with growth. If you put too many of one particular type of development in an area, you lose the balance. You lose people having been there 10, 15, 20 years. You lose the community. It doesn't work as well. And if you do too big of an area, you have problems with traffic and crime and water and sewer and everything else. So I know something about this area. Another reason to consider me is the Salt Lake County County Council passes ordinances that architects and builders live with. Maybe it's a good idea to have somebody that works in the construction industry, that works for a contractor or works for a design. And that is something that is very important because we need that balance. We have a part-time county council. They're basically there on Tuesdays, primarily Tuesday afternoons, maybe a little bit more. And we need people in there with enough of a variety of background that they can make decisions that are smart. And in areas that they don't know a lot about, which is me, I know a little bit about a lot of things and a lot about a few things, but I have learned to be smart enough to ask other questions. We need that in the county council. We need people that will recognize the ramifications of decisions that are made. Last winter, before Christmas, I asked for people to donate to help fund. We had to do printed packets. That's what's currently in statute. That's what the governor is waiving because of the virus for these individuals that are doing the referendum. But we needed $13,000 raised, at least initially, and we ended up needing close to 35, 36,000 eventually raised. Most of those donations, probably 30,000 of them, were small donations, $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, all over the state. We literally had people that contacted us and said, I'm going to give you $10. And I realized that that's not going to leave me much for Christmas, but I'm all by myself. I really don't need a lot for Christmas, but I want to be able to eat this year. That's why they signed, and that's why they donated, so that we would be able to have the packets for them to sign. I don't underestimate the impact that taxes, that donations, that contributions come from various people. That's very important to me. One of the reasons that I fought that so hard was I had walked into the store with $3. I had looked at a can of chicken that was $2.99, and I looked at a bottle of milk, and I realized that that $2.99 with the tax was going to be more than $3. I couldn't afford that can of chicken to make chicken soup for a week, so I went and got a bottle of milk so I'd be able to eat cereal. People make decisions right then based on the resources that they have, and raising taxes on food or fuel or raising taxes anywhere can negatively affect people right then. And giving them a check in the mail, which is being proposed by our federal government right now, will help, but it doesn't solve the problem. Having the government shut down private businesses all over the state creates a problem. If we told those businesses, here are the rules, you figure out how to make them work, that works. I was in a business not too long ago, probably within the last week, in Magna. One of my clients owns that particular business, and he basically, I walked in, he had a box on the floor that was marked where you would stand 6 feet away from a plexiglass divider where he would stand, and he had done everything he possibly could to make that as safe a place as possible and still be able to work. That's what we need to do. We need to give guidelines and tell people instead of having the government being so heavy-handed. I totally disagree with the calls from our county mayor and Salt Lake City mayor to basically shut everything down. The governor may have made some mistakes in some of the things he's done, but his idea is this is what we should do, but I'm not going to put you in jail over it. Just be smart, and that's a much better way to govern. I'm looking for additional questions that I've got. Let's see what I've got for additional questions. Do you support continuing efforts to repeal the law allowing signatures? They're referring to 2014 SB 54. I was not in the legislature when that passed. I was in the committee speaking against it. I showed up as one of the citizens that spoke against it. I understand why some voted for it. They thought they were saving our caucus convention system. I believe they've created a nightmare in doing that. SB 54 should have been repealed. In 2015, I ran a bill to basically put the brakes on it until we could make some modifications. That bill, that bill was copied in the Senate, passed the Senate committee, but it did not pass the House and Senate. Other people have tried to repeal it. We've got a governor currently that would veto anything like that were to pass the legislature. I am looking for somebody to be elected governor that will sign something to repeal SB 54. And the reason it is so important is in the end of 2010, I contacted somebody. I was working, self-employed, but I didn't have money. Most of my clients were individuals that didn't have money either, and I was helping them, but I didn't have a lot of money. And I contacted somebody and said, "What can I do, government? I'm really good about certain things. I'm smart about certain things." And they said, "Well, Ron Bigelow just announced that he's stepping down to be the state budget director." And I looked at that and I thought, I just helped him get elected. Well, this was December. Whoever was going to run was going to have to run around Christmas and New Year's. They'd have 2 weeks. I only had $60 worth of gas, paper, and ink to even use. But I won. Second vote, I won by one vote in the second round through the caucus convention system. The delegates selected the replacement to go to the governor who appointed me for 2 years. I would not have been able to do that without the caucus convention system. I am a big fan. The last 2 times that I've run, in 2016, 2018, I lost. I needed 3 more votes to get out of convention. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that, but I had people tell me, get signatures, then you'll know. And I am going, no, that I would be the biggest hypocrite in the state if I were to do that. I didn't sign up to get signatures. Out of the 3 Republican candidates, one of them signed to get signatures. I don't know that she will or not. But that is something that I totally disagree with. I do not believe that we should be bypassing our caucus convention system. If somebody wanted to go directly to the ballot, they could get 300 signatures and be on the ballot this fall as an independent, unaffiliated. I could have done that, but I didn't. I believe in our caucus convention system, despite the fact that I have won and lost, during this. I'm very familiar with the pros and cons. But it's the right way to go. It allows an individual that doesn't have a lot of resources, that isn't famous or an incumbent or with a lot of money, to run. I probably, at least out of the Republicans, probably have the least amount of resources as anybody. I don't have the fancy house next to the temple, and I don't have the huge business that has some of the prettiest flowers that you've ever seen. But I do have the ability to work, and I can work from home right now, which means that I'm not walking this door with $3 in my pocket. But I have raised money for this, and I raised it with the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20. I have had a couple of $100 campaign donations or contributions. I learned, and so that's what I'm doing, and that's how I will beat the Democrat, who is pretty impressive this fall. She's got ties to education. She's got ties to. She's a veteran, um, good person, but we need to keep our caucus convention system. Let's see what other questions I've got. Let me go back to this. How do you support local cities? In what way can communication between cities and county be improved? Um, I'll tell you what I started to do. I hadn't planned on running for this. You're looking for somebody that's been planning 2 to 4 years running for county council. That's not me. Earlier this year, I was focused on the referendum, the Utah 2019 tax referendum. People asked me where I was running. I said, I don't know. We'll see what happens with the referendum. That's why I was focused. Well, someone called after it was voted to repeal, and they said, how about county council too? And I said, why? And they explained it, and I thought, well, you've got a vested interest in me running there, so I'm not running against you. And but I checked it out. I talked to Amy Wender Newton. I talked to Richard Snellgrove. They gave me some information. They certainly encouraged me to look at running. That's not an endorsement from them. There's other good candidates that are running, but they certainly encouraged me to look at that. I talked to my boss. I work for a contractor that's an architect, have done for over a year. So in addition to being self-employed, I now have a job. And I talked to him about the schedule, and this would work much better. And I started to realize that we have individuals on the county council that are not listening. And I thought, I can listen. And I can read through things. And I understand how ordinances like zoning ordinances and zoning maps work because I've dealt with them for decades. And that's some of the things that they do. I've dealt with budgets in excess of 10, 15 $billion. And so the $1 billion budget, I would like to reduce dramatically, but it doesn't scare me as far as the size. So that's what I'm working on. Let's see. Other questions that I've been sent. Didn't finish the answer to that. I attended Carperton Metro Township Council meeting, and I listened. And then I went to the Kearns Metro Township meeting, and I listened. And that's what we need. I didn't see anybody else that represented those areas showing up to those meetings, and maybe they do. I haven't been to all of them. But we need, if someone's going to be on the county council, they need to periodically go to those community council meetings and learn. They need to be open. They need to have town hall meetings. Hopefully we'll be able to have physical town hall meetings at a library or someplace else, which is where I've typically had them, because I can learn. And so I can go to listen to them, and they can have opportunities to know where I'm going to be and listen to me. Emails. 4 years in the legislature, you would think that I would have had my interns reply to all my emails. I didn't. I don't know if I'll be able to pull that off here or not. There is full-time staff that will help with things like that, but I want to be able to reply to my own emails if it's at all possible for me to do so, because I learned a lot by replying to my own emails as a legislator for 4 different years. I didn't even give the password to my email address to my intern, so I couldn't blame them if they didn't reply. They helped tabulate handwritten surveys that I sent out. to all the active voters in the district. We've got some technology, but I still need to send out surveys. So if you've got some great ideas as far as what our biggest challenges are and how to solve them, please let me know. Send me an email. My email address is fred@fredcox, the number 4, Utah spelled all the way out.com. Send me it. Tell me your name, your address, so I know where you're coming from. And you do not have to be over 18 to come up with good ideas. Some of our kids come up with some of the best ideas that you'd ever had. And so just because your 16-year-old can't vote yet doesn't mean that they can't affect how things are going to happen. They're still live in this area. They still are citizens of this country, and they're residents, and they should have a voice. Let's see. I've got a couple other comments. What should be done with the United Police and Fire? Should that continue to be on the county level, or should it be disbanded and favor more local institutions? I can tell you that I was not a fan of the situation we currently have. I have had issues dealing with fire marshals and others on the county level where I believed that the local jurisdiction would have been better. Various cities, West Valley, for example, was created because they were tired of the county as far as their sheriff's department, as far as their building and zoning and everything else. They wanted to be their own. That should be encouraged. However, we may have jurisdictions that are basically bought in to what our current situation is. I do not know whether we can go backwards, and with all the buildings and other things that have been done, how do we fix that? Sometimes you can't put everything back in the bottle. But I will certainly look at that, because I believe that if it can be handled locally, it should be handled locally. I certainly would not discourage South Jordan or Harriman or any of these other places. If they want to have their own police and fire, great. We need to figure out how to allow that. And if Copperton doesn't want to have their own police and fire, and maybe they do, they should be able to have it. And if they don't, there are still places in this county where there isn't a metro township, there isn't a city, and they should be able to count on the county. Crime and jails and that whole area is something that the county does, and if the county didn't do it, we wouldn't have it. And so as long as it's needed, we shouldn't pull the rug out from underneath anybody. Let's see what other questions were sent to me. Email. What will you do to keep an ear open to the people and make sure they know how to communicate with you? I think I've answered that. I think town halls are important. Letters are obviously important. The post office still has stamps. I will take letters. Emails are a lot easier because I can respond to those better. Phone calls. If you go to my website, etc., my home number is listed. It's the home number I've had for over 30 years. I realize that, that means you don't text. I'm carrying 2 phones, and with whatever else I've got going on, that worked. And I'm sure that somebody that's 18 can actually learn to make a phone call or send an email. I am on social media. I've got over 4,000 Facebook friends. I've got pages and groups on Facebook. I've got Twitter. I've got 3,000 people following me on Twitter. I've got probably more than that on LinkedIn, Pinterest, you name it. I've got something there. I haven't figured out how to use Snapchat, and I'm a little nervous of it. So even though I've got an account there, no guarantees I'll know exactly how to respond to that. But the other social media areas I've got, I even have a Tumblr account that I've almost not used. So you should be able to get a hold of me. If you can't, certainly leave a message. I don't like my current voicemail system that I've got. So if you get a hold of me and you can't, keep on trying. But I will respond. Uh, you can ask anybody that's dealt with me out of the 4 years in the legislature as I try to respond. Anyway, I appreciate the comments. Let's see what else. How to keep an ear open to the people, make sure they know. Um, the other thing that was brought up, and I think it's very important, having to do with the virus, is an individual mentioned that she's involved with individuals in pain, and they're having to go to their doctor to get their prescription renewed, and they're over 60, and they don't like that situation because it puts them at risk. The legislature did pass something this last year, this last session, on trying to fix it so it's easier for telemedicine. Yes, the legislature does good things, and some things that I wish they wouldn't do. It's always good that they're only in there for 45 days because they could create too much damage, but they do some good things. That bill was passed, and I think it will help. As far as pain, when I was running for office at the end of 2010, first part of 2011, I had volunteered to clean lockers at a church building, and I had hurt my back. And I found out that I had two bulged discs, and I was in agony for 2 weeks. I refused to take anything because of the fact that I didn't want to hurt myself worse. I was afraid that if I took something, it would mask it, and I would hurt myself worse. And so I was in agony. And so I was literally running at the same time that I had this problem. I would get out of the car, and my goal was to stand up straight with a smile on my face by the time I got to the front door, because I knocked on every door of every delegate. I didn't have 250, 260 delegates to deal with. That's a wrong deal, but it's a lot harder to knock on those doors with this particular district. But I had fewer, and so I literally did knock on all those doors and left flyers for those that I met. And we had debates, etc. But I had a problem. I couldn't figure out how to solve that. I'd leave my doctor's office, and he would try different therapies, traction, you name it, and I would walk out worse. And I talked to two of my friends, and I found out that they had bulged disc. One of them had 5, and he said, just take 2 times the dosage of Aleve. And I said, will that work? And he said, yes. And I got a new doctor, and he took an x-ray because the other guy wanted an MRI, and I didn't have insurance and didn't have the money to do it, but I could afford an x-ray. And he said, I can't see everything, but I can see what the bones are doing. And because of what the bones are doing, you've got 2 bulged discs. And here's some things that we can do to teach you so that you do not hurt yourself like this again, to strengthen your muscles. And I asked about the Aleve, and he said, in your particular case, it will reduce inflammation, and it'll stop the spasms. And I learned. And so when I took office in January 2011, I had Aleve in my pocket because I was afraid I was going to be on the floor otherwise. But I understand pain. I know what that feels like. And maybe that's not as bad as pain gets, but it's as bad as I've ever felt it before in my life. So if individuals have pain, they should be able to talk to a doctor. They should be able to get recommendations. In my case, I opted not to use the prescription drugs that were suggested to me by a number of people. I found Celadrin, which is an esterified fatty acid, molecular lubricant, reduces inflammation, over the counter, $20 at Dave's. That worked most of the time, and then I'd break out the Aleve on occasion. But I learned how to get out of bed differently, how to get out of a car differently. I changed the way I worked. And I don't know the answer, but these individuals that are in pain should be able to contact their doctor and get medication if they need it, and shouldn't have to worry about having their license revoked. And I'm hoping what the legislature just did will help that. I understand that the drug enforcement people have sent out letters that basically tell these doctors that they don't have to do what they're doing. I hope that if you've got somebody that's a doctor listening to me, that they look out for that. Don't drag your 60-year-old person that is in fear because they've got pre-existing conditions that they're going to die because they're going to pick up the virus. People do much better with no stress. They do much better if they can laugh. If they get enough rest and they eat the right vegetables, take the right vitamins and minerals, and have an opportunity to laugh, they will be much more apt to fight this virus than almost anything that we can do, other than staying away from each other until we know who's got it and who doesn't. Testing would actually be helpful. Um, I hope that helps. That's all the questions that I have seen as of right now. Looking at my email and looking at people that have commented off to the side. And if I missed your question, I will do what I did last time, and that is I will copy it and paste it on my blog and answer it. You're welcome to go to my blog. It's Fred Cox, the number 4, Utah.blogspot.com. And yeah, I realize it says Blogspot, and yes, I've had it for over 10 years. But if you want to know anything about me, what I think about cow belching, you name it, it's there. One of the bills that was passed by the legislature about locks was an absolutely terrible bill, and it passed with, I don't think anybody voting against it. I wasn't in the legislature at the time, and I tried really hard, but they wouldn't listen to me. We need to elect people that will listen, whether it's the legislature, whether it's the governor, whether it's the president of the United States, whether it's our county council, whether it's our county mayor. They need to be willing to listen, and they need to be willing to support our state and federal constitutions. They take an oath to defend them, and I certainly have in the past, and I will continue to do so. Appreciate your comments. Wish you the best. You have a great Saturday. There's a very good chance that I will schedule another one for next Saturday. I don't have the time picked out yet. I want to see what else is going on to try to avoid missing things. It's the reason I scheduled 1 o'clock. There's a number of things happening this weekend that involve a number of people, and I tried to pick a time that would avoid affecting them. So that's why you should vote for me, because I will listen and I will follow our state and federal constitution, and I will look for ways to save hundreds of millions of dollars by not moving the prison when you could have a new prison where it was, and still have land available for development. I don't always win those fights, but I will do everything I can to save hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of taxpayers' money any chance I get. And even if it's only $5, not everybody has $5 in their wallet. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.